You can figure out what you're doing this for. Do it for your future family. Do it for the future you. Do it for you when you're 8 years old and do it for you when you're 80 years old. Finding your purpose is a thing that will always change because things change over time. So all you need to do is find your purpose right now and work towards that. You can always adjust later. That's the key. Welcome, everyone, to the Close More Sales podcast. On today's episode, we're going to talk about something that so many sales professionals and entrepreneurs struggle with, which is having a consistent sales process, some sales routine to follow in terms of their daily life, in terms of what they're doing on a day-to-day basis throughout the week, throughout the month, throughout the year. What you do repeatedly is what guarantees your success. And if there's all types of variability in how you get things done, you're hurting yourself, you're hurting your ability to be successful. So I've got a bunch of questions here that I'm going to answer that were compiled about running a routine, making sure you can stay consistent and how to be effective, not just in the long run, but in the short term, to be effective tomorrow as well as next year. So we'll go into that here, answering those questions as we go through it. Our purpose here, why should you listen to the show though? Why should I even listen to this? I hear you shout. Our purpose is to empower sales professionals and entrepreneurs to push themselves to grow, achieve unimaginable success without burning out, and ultimately transform their lives. I'm Ian Ross, and I am obsessed with all things sales, and I work with teams across the country to make more money by asking better questions. The most proven path to achieving financial freedom is maximizing your earning potential. And a sales role is the lowest barrier, but the highest possible ceiling for entry onto that path. And anyone can become a killer salesperson with the right techniques, mindset, and consistency. Consistency is what we're talking about today. Everything we cover on this podcast is geared toward one thing: helping you close more sales so that you can live the life that you want. We are still in the growth stage for this podcast. So if you get any value from this episode today, please follow, subscribe, let us know either in the comments on YouTube or in a review where you listen to podcasts, and tell us what it is you got out of the show and let other people know about it as well. Don't keep it a secret. The more listeners that we have, the more incentivized I am to keep putting out content for you for free. Because here's the thing, if you have conversations where how well you speak determines how much money you can make, you are in a sales role. And if you'd like to get better at what you do, text CLOSE, CLOSE, to 33777, and we'll see if we can help you out along the process. The first question I have here is, what are the essential elements of a successful daily sales routine? What are the essential elements of a successful daily sales routine? This is a fantastic question and an incredibly important one, because the top sales professionals at any serious company, like truly the top 20, definitely the top 10% at any company you can know, at your company, anywhere there's people who are professionals at this, who've been doing this more than 6 months, every single one of those top people follows some type of routine. And the essential elements is usually broken up into a few key parts. The first part is just simply understanding that you should be time blocking. You should be trying to do things as consistently as possible on a, if not daily basis, at least weekly basis. And you do that through setting certain time frames, blocking off certain times on your calendar to get certain things done. You'll see Jeb Blunt from the Sales Gravy guy, that he talks about this all the time. His book, Fanatical Prospecting, a fantastic book about making sure you prioritize part of your time to devote to reaching out to new business, to hopping on the phones, to doing what you need to do to reach out to new potential prospects. So the essential elements of a successful daily sales routine is, first, having a routine in general. Second, making sure some aspect of pursuing brand new business, and I mean brand new, not just calling appointments that were set for you, not just fulfilling what was already on your calendar, but a blocked out time to call out, to send emails, to do something where people who'd never heard of you or weren't on your radar or weren't ready to engage with you at all are now brought into the fray are now getting into your pipeline in some way, shape, or form. That is important. Always make sure you have a time for prospecting. Outside of that, making sure if you can, if you really want to be successful, that you spend as little time as you can during the day, like during your actual hours, on email. Email is the biggest time suck I know of. I still struggle with it. I have an assistant to help me, and I still struggle with it. If you are having to check your email 2, 3, some people check every hour throughout the day, you are far less efficient than you can be because you're never super efficient when you open up an email. You have to delete this. You read this. Oh, that's not that big a deal. Oh my gosh, here's a newsletter for a thing I like. Here's a discount on this. It's sucking away your time. A sales professional has the same amount of time in the day as everyone else because that's how that works. And how effective they are with that time is what determines their success. So a top sales professional is spending as little time in email during their day as they possibly can. You spend time in the start before your ability to reach out to people, to have conversations, sales conversations, to talk to prospects, to present, to demo, to have consultations, whatever your role is. And then at the end of the day, when that's over, is when I would recommend going back to your email. That's how you should be thinking about email. So be consistent. Make sure you have a consistent time for brand new business, some aspect of that. And then reducing time spending, checking your email, deleting things, responding to people during the day. And anything else in your role that is an equivalent of email is making sure that's blocked off as well. So say you're in a tech sales role or something and you're having to be on Slack all the time, you should have 3 hours where you're not checking Slack, right? Like it's not even on your radar to be concerned about it. Those types of interruptions where you get new written information that you have to now ingest and digest and determine, should I respond to this or what's going on with the company here, will always distract you from what you're actually paid to do, which is be effective and efficient with your time. So those are what make they're essential to the successful daily sales routine, is making sure you are consistent as much as is humanly possible. I understand it can change day to day, week to week. You've got an event, you've got a workshop, a seminar, but be as consistent as possible. Get into a routine. Make sure you block off time to prospect for new business and reduce the time during your day as much as is humanly possible regarding email, Slack, Google Messenger, any of the things that suck you out of actually doing what you need to be doing, which is your activity, having conversations with people who could buy. Next question here is, what role does exercise play in maintaining high sales performance? For me, the more I exercise, especially aerobically, not just like muscle wise, but actually like moving, getting my heart rate going, it helps my sales performance tremendously. Tremendously. I will not say it is a requirement because I'm sure there are salespeople who don't exercise a lick who perform better than me. So I'm not saying it's a guarantee, but I would bet you if those guys who don't exercise at all, who don't prioritize any aspect of maintaining their health or improving their health or getting their heart pumping, if they're not doing that, they are actually less effective than they could be. Because if your brain is in your mind, and a sales job is entirely based on using your brain and your mouth combined. It's like your mouth comes through using your brain and your brain's within your body, right? Your brain's in your body. And if you move your body, if you take care of your body, your brain's going to function better. So it helps. Like if you ignore it entirely, it's to your detriment. Just be aware you are choosing to not be as efficient as you can be. I'm not saying you have to, just be conscious you're making that choice. And here's a personal point about this. I remember when I was selling solar, I was so darn busy. If you counted the driving time for going to these appointments, the amount of hours I was working per week is kind of incomprehensible. Even though I was making very good money for how much I was working, if you count driving, I was working so much. I would leave often at like 7:30 in the morning. My first appointment could be an hour and a half away. I could have an appointment starting at 8:30 or 9, depending on the setup. And I needed to make sure I was there early enough so that I wouldn't be showing up even 5 minutes late. And then I could have an appointment set as late for me as 8 p.m. And it could be an hour and a half away, and that appointment could take an hour to 2 hours to go through. And that was me 6 days a week. So that was my setup. I was working a tremendous amount. That being said, I had a limiting belief at the time, but I wouldn't verbalize it because I was just driving around all day, so I wasn't home. So I'm just like eating junk food. I'm eating like Taco Bell and stuff, trying to not spend too much money while I'm out. And I'm just eating not good food in drive-through, driving between these appointments. But I did have a shift. I realized I didn't want to say I don't have time to work out, even though I'd probably said that earlier in my life when I had a lot more time than I did now. I genuinely had very little time available to me to work out. However, I saw Ryan Serhant, who's a real estate agent in New York. He has a show, I don't know if it's still on, Sell It Like Serhant. He was famous on $1 Million in New York. And I know he would work out in New York, in Manhattan, at like 4:30, 5 in the morning. And he's a very, very busy, disciplined man. And I remember thinking, he's finding time to work out before his day. Like, yeah, sure, I might have to be leaving the house at 7, but I'm not getting up at that time at 4 in the morning to make sure I get my 45-minute workout in, because I just feel like I didn't have the energy to. And so I made a very clear choice to not verbalize out loud saying, I don't have time to work out, even though it felt like I didn't, because I saw someone who was probably busier than I was, working as many, if not more hours, with a lot more responsibility and eyeballs on him than me, just some solar guy driving around. And he was still finding the time to work out. What does that mean? That means I just wasn't efficient with my time yet, or I wasn't prioritizing this. So what I would say out loud, even though I was feeling like, oh, I don't have time, poor me, was I made sure that what I put out into the world was not, I don't have time. It was simply, I'm not prioritizing working out right now. And how I verbalize that and how you verbalize your availability is really key. Now I work out a ton and I'm busier than I've ever been. But I remember when it started with an internal shift, which is choosing not to say I don't have the time, but instead verbalizing, I'm just not prioritizing that right now. Because Ryan Serhant, God bless it, he's not better than me as a person. So I have that belief fundamentally about anyone I see doing anything. So therefore, I get to realize, like, no, he's working out in the morning and I'm not, just because I'm not prioritizing that, not because they're better than me. If he's busier than me, that means I have the same amount of time as him. I'm just not prioritizing it. Now I do prioritize it, and I've seen my income, life, everything improve because of it. And I'm very glad I am. But that started by not immediately just going to the gym and working out every day. It started with the internal shift of not verbalizing, well, I don't have the time, because I knew someone else who was even busier than me was still prioritizing it. And they're not better than me. I can be as good as any single person. And because I have that belief in my soul, I would not verbalize that I don't have the time. I just verbalized I wasn't prioritizing it. You should look for that too. What techniques can I use to stay disciplined and avoid procrastination? This is hard and will require a lot more internal work than something I can answer right here. But let's make sure we, in the same realm of the answer I just gave about what role should exercise play, if we were to think about what is the difference between discipline and motivation. Motivation is feeling like you want to do something, and discipline is doing something regardless of how you feel. So the nature of that question is correct, which is the way to avoid procrastination is to be disciplined. So then the question is, if I want to avoid procrastination, how do I cultivate discipline? And my answer to cultivating discipline is to start cultivating it with smaller steps for things unrelated to something that matters a lot to you. And you build up the habits of discipline over something else that's not work related. So for instance, let's just say you're having trouble making the amount of dials you need. Back to exercise in the previous question, I can get disciplined in making sure the very first thing I get up every single time I wake up is do push-ups to failure. That's a lot easier than making 100 dials or something. And so if I can do that consistently, in terms of the push-ups, as soon as I get out of bed, I'm doing a miniature version of discipline because every morning I'm not going to feel like it. And it's a lot easier to accomplish. But discipline is a skill and a muscle as well. If you start exhibiting discipline about smaller, simpler aspects of your life that you could then incrementally improve on, you change who you are. You become a disciplined person about something else that theoretically shouldn't matter as much. And that makes it easier to be disciplined about other things. So the technique I would say is get disciplined about something that theoretically doesn't have money on the line or isn't responsible for your job, and do it small, do it consistently, and do it every single day, regardless of how you feel. If you can do that for 2 weeks, I promise you, you become the type of person where the idea of holding off on your other work starts to seem sillier because you've already developed this disciplined mindset about something else. If you want more advice on that, text CLOSE to 33777. What are some effective ways to stay motivated during long work days? That comes back to what I said a little bit earlier, which is that I am not in pursuit of motivation. I am in pursuit of discipline. So how do I stay motivated to be disciplined? It's understanding my why, understanding my purpose, understanding that if I have something that I am working hard for me, it's providing for my family. If I am trying to provide for my family and take care of the people that I love and make sure that they have a healthy, happy life, and at the same time, avoid a life of stress, of misery, of worrying about bills, of not being able to pay medical expenses as they rise up. If my work is in pursuit of not only giving them luxury and abundance, but also protecting them from all the things that scarcity can cause on a family, I remind myself, and I sometimes have to remind myself of this on a weekly basis. It doesn't happen as much now because you develop it like a muscle. But every now and again, I need to remind myself, if I'm choosing to relax at 4 p.m. when I wanted to keep working till 5, I work a lot longer than 9 to 5, but in that example, let's say it's 4 p.m., I'm like, I'm tired, I'm going to take it easy, and I still have a full hour where I'm just going to kick my legs up and not actually do my activity. I can remind myself I am choosing to avoid my own temporary discomfort for an hour over providing for my family. I reframe things that way. I am choosing avoiding discomfort for an hour over continuing to provide and protect my family. And if you are a real responsible human being, that should be a kick in the butt to do your work. So I stay motivated to be in pursuit of discipline by that sort of mantra. Like, just remind myself, am I really that type of person? You're damn right I'm not. I make sure that I do the work that I need to do. And I stay motivated to do that because I know what my purpose, I know who I'm doing it for. And if you don't have a family, make one up. Imagine it your future family. You've got someone else in your life. You can donate to a charity. Like, it doesn't have to be your immediate family. I don't care if you're a 21-year-old who no one likes. You can envision something in the future that you're doing this for. And if you have trouble to do that imagination, I sincerely doubt that. You can figure out what you're doing this for. Do it for your future family. Do it for the future you. Do it for you when you're 8 years old, and do it for you when you're 80 years old. Like, finding your purpose is a thing that will always change because things change over time. So all you need to do is find your purpose right now and work towards that. It can always adjust later. That's the key. How can I use technology to streamline my sales processes and routines? I'm sure you have some type of CRM that you are not making best use out of. I'm like every sales guy, I hate having to use technology to do stuff. If I could, my whole day would just be talking to people on the phone and shaking hands and meeting people in rooms and being social that way. But I also know there's limitations on how effective I can be at scale if I'm simply revolving around that type of thing. So I am always looking for everything I can to position myself to be doing what I do best, talking to people either on the phone or in person. And I want the technology to automate the tasks that I hate doing as much as is humanly possible. And then I just do them, right? Like, how do I get myself to fill in the CRM? I'm choosing my temporary discomfort over providing for my family, because that's what I'd be doing here. Because if I never fill in the CRM, I should get fired. And I don't want to get fired because then I can't provide for my family. So let me just do this. How can I make time for training and education without disrupting my sales activities? Easy. Don't do education and training on your own when you should be doing your sales activities. That's an easy question. Do your sales activities when it's selling time. And then once it's no longer, you can't be calling businesses, you can't be not dialing homeowners, knocking on doors, standing in your, you know, in your storefront, wherever you're selling. Whenever you can't be doing that, that's when you do training and education. So it's the idea that you're choosing between your sales activities and training and education is nonsense. What you are choosing between is training and education and Netflix, or training and education and watching TV, or relaxing. Like, that's what you're choosing between, not between your sales activities. If you're thinking that those are your two choices, it's because you've somehow resolved that you can't do any type of work outside of your 9 to 5 range. It's like, don't be in sales if that's the case. Get obsessed with getting better. And the way you get better is not actively in the game, it's in the off season, to use the sports analogy, right? Like, when do people get best in professional athletes? They don't get better throughout the season as much. It's during the off season when they're not trying to fulfill the game. So if you're trying to get better at what you're doing, if you're watching this podcast thinking about getting better, make time for it outside of actively doing your work to try and improve so you can do your work better. If you hit 5 p.m. and you're like, all right, I'm done everything with sales for the day, like, give up on sales. Like, this isn't for you. Or you can decide it can be. You can decide it can be. And once you decide that, you'll realize that that question's crazy. What are some techniques for managing stress and avoiding burnout in sales? It is a hard thing to avoid burnout effectively. So, first off, like what you're selling, right? Believe in what you're selling. Don't just look for the paycheck. Actually enjoy the types of conversations you're having. Enjoy who you're talking to. Enjoy what you're doing. That helps tremendously. Secondly, stop being a pushy salesperson who's so certain you got to get this done and I can help you. If not, sales is not that I transfer my certainty to you. It's like created certainty within you. I'll do a whole other episode on this at some point, but that's a really key point here to cover here. I don't have to be so certain that you absolutely want this. You want this for your family, correct? That's outdated, like Glenn Ross nonsense. It's not real. That's not what sales is. Sales is creating certainty in you. I don't have to be certain. If I'm going around being so certain that you need this and you're like, no, I don't, I will burn out. But if I just do everything in my power to make sure you've either disqualified yourself or the natural conclusion of you wanting to move forward occurs, and I don't care either way, I cannot burn out because I am committed to following my process. I am not committed to trying to go for the results. I did a whole episode on this too before, which is that you want to be focused on the habits that you're doing. Celebrate your activity. And if you know your numbers and celebrate your activity, it's as if you can see your bank account increase linearly to the work you were doing, in which case it's almost impossible to burn out. If I pick up the phone, dial it, no one answers, and hang up the phone, and I see my bank account click up in money, I will not burn out because I'm like, oh, that was the easiest money I ever made. The problem becomes being so focused on trying to get the results, and then the results don't come for whatever reason. And now I'm going through that roller coaster of like, oh, I just had a huge month. Oh, I had a bad month. Oh, I had another bad month. Oh, I had an okay month and then a terrible month. And it's that instead of going, I am doing the work I need to do. I'm doing that consistently. That's what I'm celebrating. Shift your mind and celebrate your activity, celebrate your behaviors, celebrate the person you are to do those behaviors and be disciplined about those behaviors. And you will avoid burnout entirely and make Beverly Hills surge in money in the process. The problem is being glued to the result. Just like everything is tied up and, oh, I need this to close. That's how you burn out. So stop doing that so you stop burning out. Let's see. How can I stay committed to my sales routine when working from home? It should be easier to stay committed to your sales routine when working from home, in theory, unless you are actively working from home surrounded by friends and family and stuff. Like if you got roommates and stuff, that's the only I'm going to assume the nature of this question is because there's other people at home that's preventing you. Because If you're on your own and you can't do it, that's a whole other issue of challenges. I usually find like I prefer the office because I'm able to get out of the home and be away from what I'm doing with my family and keep my family here and keep work here. But if it was just me living alone, I'd be working constantly. So assuming that it's your reasons for struggling to being committed to your sales routine is working from home comes from just setting boundaries with whoever you live with, making it clear this is when I work, this is when I'm available, and I'm not available when I'm during this time. And if you need issues, like if you're getting barged in on, set firmer boundaries. If you've got kids, with the money you can make in sales from being consistent, hire a babysitter. Like there's ways to make it work. And you can. This sounds more like an internal issue than a reality of actually getting it done. How can I stay positive and motivated when facing daily rejections? Were you expecting to never face daily rejections? Did you think every single person was going to say yes to you forever? If the answer to that is no, which it obviously should be, what does that have to do with staying positive and motivated? Earlier on, I talked about trying to celebrate your activity. This is the key to keeping positive because if I did my activity right, who cares when I get rejected? That's inevitable. It is inevitable. You will not get 100% of people saying yes. Anyone who says I can close 100% of people can't close a damn barn door. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. That's not real sales. That's social media garbage. That's not real life. Or they're not defining close as actually selling them and getting them to sign up. They're getting them to go, okay, which is not closing. That's nonsense. So it means rejection is part of sales. You just got to get through the rejections to get to the positive ones. You either haven't been doing this for very long, which is fine. That's totally fine if you're brand new to this. But you just have to reorient yourself around celebrating your activity and realizing rejection is an inevitability. Like there's the old joke that like the best guys to pick up women are people who did door-to-door sales because you got rejected to your face so many times that like who cares if they say no? There's a truth to that because you realize rejection didn't hurt you. You were not harmed in this process. Your ego maybe felt a little bit of a little bit of a nudge, but your ego is not you. You have control over how much of that ego you let affect you. And that happens over time. You can control that. You have more control than you're giving yourself credit for. How can I stay adaptable and adjust my sales routine when unexpected challenges arise? How can I stay adaptable and adjust my sales routine when unexpected challenges arise? That's very hard for me to answer broadly because I'll tell you where my brain is going. I would be seeking more clarity. I want to figure out the specifics. What's the challenges? What aspect of your routine is messed up? It's very hard for me to answer that broadly, but I'll speak about it maybe through a lens of how I do it rather than giving advice to someone asking that question because it's broad enough that it's hard for me to give broad all-encompassing advice. I expect there to be challenges. Unexpected challenges is almost an oxymoron. Like it doesn't really make sense to me. Now, obviously, there are unexpected challenges, but I expect there to be unexpected challenges, if that makes sense. So as a result of that, I always make sure there's enough variability in my time or my options to be able to make sure I can change things. The simple truth is just making sure you are prioritizing through your routine what actually needs to get done. So let's say now suddenly I gave that advice about not checking email, and now you get promoted to a role where you have to check email throughout the day, right? That's an example of maybe now I've got a new thing I have to do, which is an unexpected challenge that I didn't know. How am I supposed to adjust to that? Is you check your email at very specific times and not just throughout the day. Maybe it's you have to check it every hour because you have to check it so often, but it's not during that hour. It's only on the hour. It's only at the 15 minutes of the hour, whatever it is. You get really precise around those adjustments. So just make sure you're prioritizing what actually allows you to be effective rather than prioritizing what's easiest to accomplish first, because now you get that sort of dopamine hit of getting it done. You got to get rid of that idea. The goal should be to prioritize what's important. Unexpected challenges will arise. Make sure your adjustments are in favor of what you actually need to do. How can I stay motivated during slow periods? Slow periods are when you get better. I said that off season is when you improve. That is when you get better. So let's say you were used to all these leads coming in, and then suddenly marketing costs shoot off, go crazy, and now you have a third as many leads coming in as you had before. Well, now you get to get better at prospecting. Now you get to learn how to do email marketing. Now you get to learn all these now you get to cultivate your follow-up skills. I stay motivated, if we're going to use that word, of looking for the slow periods, looking for the unexpected challenge, looking for something to not work, because that's where the growth opportunity is. I've said this on other episodes, and I don't want to sound like a broken record, but it's such an important point. And it's not something you can snap your fingers and have done. You can't just suddenly go, oh, great. Now every challenge is a growth opportunity. I'll never be upset again. It requires a process. It takes time. So it's worth repeating. I never feel like just because I said this once on this podcast, I'll never say it again. Because anything that's worth saying that I say on this podcast, probably you can't snap your fingers and do immediately. So if anything is worth saying repeatedly on this podcast, because you can't snap your fingers and have made a shift forever, it means it's worth repeating, because it takes time to implement, and especially it takes time to master. So the implementing things well requires constant reminder. I mean, I remind myself of things constantly, of things I believe, of things that are important to me, of things I know I need to do. If I could just snap my fingers for the audio side and just suddenly be switched forever, there's no reason for training, right? We have this thing we talk about here. Is training something we have done, or is training something we do? We do this. It's not something we've done. That's getting better. That's staying good, because challenges arise, things happen. And if you think, oh, I went through a sales training program, I'm good now, I can point to thousands of people who are better than you. Almost immediately, by the very nature of you having that thought process. Getting better is an iterative process over time. That's how to think about this. The way you get better, the way you improve, is not learning one thing once and now your life's changed forever, because you have already heard so much information throughout your life. You've already heard information that you're not utilizing. I promise you, you're not investing the way you've heard. You're not eating the way you should. You're not exercising the way you should. There's all these things. You've heard the information before, but you're not doing them. Why? Because just hearing the information one time, or even a dozen times, or even getting a coach, getting a personal trainer, all of those things all erode over time. They erode over time. So the way to get better is not thinking, I just need to learn this thing and then I'm good. It's now going, I need to make this a part of my life. How can you stay motivated during slow periods? You're asking a dumb question. The way to get motivated during slow periods is an entirely different shift, which is making sure you are constantly improving. When you get slow periods, oh, good, now I get to get better faster than before, because I was already improving and trying to get better, but I was busy and wasn't able to devote myself to it. So it was only incremental progress. Oh, leads have slowed down. Now it's time for me to crush it so that when leads pick back up, I'm better than I've ever been. This is weathering the storm, right? This is making sure you don't burn out, is getting obsessed with this idea of getting better. If you want to be surrounded by other people who also are obsessed with the idea of getting better, if you feel like the people in your life don't get this, if other salespeople at your company or your boss or your manager, if you feel like you're surrounded by people who don't get what I'm talking about, who just want to just do the bare minimum and call it a day, they're done. Now let's go relax. Let's go watch. Have you seen that show? Did you watch that movie? Did you go to that festival? I was done with work. If you're surrounded by those people and you're tired of it, and you're ready to level up, to be around other people who are trying to get better all the time, because that is the path towards what you want and you know it is, text close to 33777. I know I say that every episode, but there's a reason for it. Our community is devoted to that very idea of being surrounded by people who want to get better and want to improve and want to surround themselves with people who want to get better and want to improve. This is the path forward. Boy, I got jazzed up there. I'm Ian Ross. This has been the Close More Sales Podcast.